Everyone laughed. When the Alpha King married the broken Omega, until her secret changed everything. The great hall of Blackthorn Castle had never been so quiet, and it had never been so amused. Every noble in the Northern Territory had come to see this wedding, not out of respect, but out of curiosity. They wanted to see the strongest Alpha in 100 years stand beside the woman everyone called broken. King Ashborn Vale sat on his high seat with his arms crossed, watching the doors at the far end of the hall. He was not a man who smiled often, and he was not smiling now. His pack elders had given him one order for the new year: marry before the winter solstice, or lose the support of the council. He had not chosen a bride out of love. He had chosen a name from the bottom of a list, the name nobody else wanted, and that name belonged to a woman called Wren Calloway. The doors opened, and a hush spread through the hall like frost across a window. Wren walked in alone. No father to give her away, no mother to fix her veil, no pack behind her to make her look important. She wore a plain gray dress, nothing like the silver gowns the other Omegas wore to court. Her head was down, her shoulders drawn in, and her hands were folded so tightly in front of her that her knuckles had turned pale. Someone in the crowd laughed behind a gloved hand. Another noble whispered to his wife that the king had been given the scraps of the Omega market. The girl 3 packs had already rejected as too damaged to be worth keeping. The whispers followed her all the way up the aisle, but Wren did not look up, did not flinch at the sound of her own name being used like a joke. Ashborn watched her hands instead of her face. They were not shaking the way a frightened person's hands shake, loose and fluttering. They were shaking in small, controlled bursts, the kind of shake a person makes when they are counting something, counting exits, counting distance, counting the number of steps between herself and the nearest door. He filed that thought away and said nothing. The ceremony itself was short, cold, and designed by the elders to remind Wren of her place. There were no flowers chosen for her, no music she might have liked, no warmth in the words spoken over them. When it came time for Ashborn to take her hand, Wren went rigid for exactly 1 second, her whole body locking like a deer that has heard a branch snap. Then, just as quickly, she softened her fingers and let him hold her hand as though nothing had happened at all. Nobody else in the hall noticed. Ashborn noticed everything. In the weeks that followed, the pack expected Wren to behave the way broken Omegas were supposed to behave: quiet, weepy, grateful for any scrap of kindness thrown her way. Instead, she disappeared for hours at a time, and returned with dirt on the soles of her boots and leaves caught in her hair, offering no explanation to the guards who asked where she had been. She flinched from a hand placed suddenly on her shoulder, but she did not flinch from danger. The pack doctor, a careful and observant woman named Ilsa, mentioned to Ashborn, almost as an afterthought, that she had once seen Wren walk calmly past a snarling, sick coyote in the northern woods, without her heartbeat rising even slightly. Ilsa found it strange enough to bring up over dinner, the way one might mention an unusual bird sighting. Ashborn found it more than strange. He began watching his new wife the way he watched a threat he could not yet name, carefully, patiently, waiting for the shape of the truth to reveal itself. Wren, for her part, kept to the edges of the castle. She ate her meals early, before the rest of the household woke. She avoided crowded rooms and loud gatherings, and when forced into them, she stood near the walls with her eyes tracking every door, every window, every person who moved too quickly. The court whispered that she was simple-minded, too damaged by whatever had happened to her before to hold a real conversation. Ashborn began to suspect they had all mistaken careful for broken, and he wondered how long she had been allowing that mistake to protect her. The night everything changed began like any other. Ashborn had gone to bed later than usual, his mind full of council matters and border disputes with the southern packs. He did not hear the window latch give way in his study 3 floors below. He did not hear the careful footsteps of 4 rogue wolves moving through the servants' passage, sent by a rival pack that had never forgiven the Vale line for an old war debt. Wren heard them. She was already awake, as she often was at that hour, sitting by her own window with a book she was not really reading. The moment the first footstep fell wrong on the old floorboard outside her door, something in her shifted, her spine straightened, her breathing slowed instead of quickening. She set the book down without a sound and reached beneath the loose board under her bed, the one nobody had ever asked her about, and drew out a blade she had kept hidden there since her first week in the castle. She moved through the hallway, like she had done it 100 times before, silent, low, aware of every shadow. By the time Ashborn's own guards reached his chamber, alerted by the sound of a struggle, they found 3 intruders already on the floor, and Wren standing over the 4th, her chest rising and falling hard, her eyes fixed on her own hands, as though she could not quite believe what they had just done. The blade in her grip was clean of nothing. Blood had reached the hem of her nightgown, and still, she did not scream, did not cry, did not perform the fear everyone expected of her. She simply stood there, breathing, until Ashborn arrived and saw the scene for what it was. Word spread through the castle by morning. The court that had laughed at the king's broken bride now spoke of her in a different tone, careful and uncertain, unsure what to make of a woman who could put down 4 trained wolves before the household guard even reached the stairs. That night, Ashborn found her in the garden, sitting very still beside the old fountain, wrapped in a shawl she did not need for the cold. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse her of anything. He simply sat down beside her and waited, because he had learned by then that Wren spoke best when she was not being pushed to speak at all. It took a long while, but eventually the truth came out of her, the way truth always came out of Wren, in careful pieces, never all at once. She was not a broken Omega. She had never been broken. She was the last surviving daughter of the Ashwood line, the pack that Ashborn's own father had destroyed 20 years earlier, in a war built on a lie about stolen land that had never actually been stolen at all. She had been a child when it happened, hidden by an old family servant in a root cellar, while her home burned above her. She had survived the years since by burying everything that might mark her as an Ashwood, her bloodline, her training, her name. She had built a mask of fragility so complete that even she sometimes forgot where the performance ended, and the real woman began. She had married Ashborn to get close enough to end the Vale line once and for all, to finish what the war had started. That had been the plan from the very beginning, the reason she had allowed herself to be chosen from the bottom of that list. But somewhere in the counting of exits, somewhere between the quiet mornings and the careful conversations, and the strange, steady kindness Ashborn had shown her without ever demanding anything back, she had stopped looking for the door. Ashborn did not call his guards. He did not reach for a weapon. He sat with the weight of what his father had done, a truth far uglier than anything the official histories had recorded, and he sat with the fact that the woman beside him had chosen, every single day since their wedding, not to end his life when she easily could have. That choice, he realized, meant far more than any vow spoken at an altar built to humiliate her. In the days that followed, Ashborn did something no one expected. He brought Wren before the full council, not as the broken Omega they had mocked, but as the last daughter of a murdered pack, standing beside the king, willing to unmake his father's lie in front of the entire court. He laid out the old records, the falsified land claims, the letters his father had hidden away, out of guilt he never had the courage to face. The truth did more than save Wren from the shame the court had tried to bury her under. It ended a 20-year cover-up that had let certain elders quietly profit from Ashwood land, long after the pack itself had been wiped from the maps. It made Wren, publicly and undeniably, one of the most respected figures in the entire territory. At the pack's winter gathering that year, the same nobles who had laughed at her wedding watched Wren stand beside Ashborn, not folded into his shadow the way a broken bride might be expected to stand, but shoulder to shoulder with him, her chin level, her eyes steady on the crowd that had once mocked her. A young noblewoman, half out of genuine curiosity and half out of nervous humor, asked if the old rumors had been true, if she really had been the broken Omega everyone once believed her to be. Ashborn answered, before Wren had the chance to. No, he said. She was just very good at being underestimated. The hall that had once been full of quiet laughter at her expense fell silent again, but this time, it was the silence of respect. Wren allowed herself, for the first time since she had walked through those doors months before, the smallest of smiles, one that reached all the way to her eyes.